And the guest today is the Vice Dean of Peterborough Cathedral, Canon Tim Alban Jones. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Kev. Hello, John.
Welcome. I know you know John pretty well. You come on to PCR FM every Wednesday morning, and we're getting quite a following. My mum adores your voice. She listens every Wednesday. Oh, I like the sound of that, Tim. My first question is, have you always had such a wonderful voice?
Well, I've always had this voice. I've not had any other one. This is the one with which I was born, and this is the one that I use every day. It's just an ordinary, everyday working voice.
But as a man of the cloth, standing in front of a lot of people a lot of time with your services, you need a voice that carries and that's clear.
Well, I'm lucky that I have a good pair of lungs, and I can normally get my voice to the back of any church building. I can even use it in the cathedral without the microphones.
See, John, I don't know whether you're aware of what Tim said to me a little bit earlier. Sometimes he needs turning down at the cathedral because of his bellowing voice. Have you been and seen Tim in action?
I've seen Tim in action. I've seen him give many a decent talk. So, Tim, when did you? Let's start from the start. When did you know that you had a calling, if you like? When did you first become aware of God and the direction of your life, I guess?
When I was a teenager, I was always somebody who went to church from an early age. I was what they call a cradle Anglican. I was baptised as an Anglican, and we used to go C and E, in other words, Christmas and Easter, rather than every week.
I thought you were going to say Church of England.
Exactly, that's C of E. This was C and E, Christmas and Easter. When I went to school, we used to have chapel every day, and slowly over time something sort of took root, and I thought this was something that was for me. I actually wanted to do your job, Kev. I wanted to be a broadcaster on Radio 3.
Did you?
I did.
Have you ever come close to moving in that direction?
Well, at the end of my university time, I decided I would just put this church thing to bed. I would go and see whether that was going to come off, and if they said no, I was off to the BBC. And thankfully, the church said yes. And here I am, well, a good 35 years later.
Come on, count them up. Is it 35 years?
I've been ordained 36 years this year, so 3 years training before that. It's nearly 40 years.
To get to Vice Dean of a beautiful, iconic cathedral like Peterborough Cathedral, what's the career path?
Well, the Church of England is a very strange organisation. It doesn't really have a career path as such. You all start out as curates, and most of us then go on and be vicars somewhere. And for many, if not most clergy, being a vicar is all they will ever do. It's all I did until I came to Peterborough. I was a parish priest for 28 years before I came to Peterborough. And that was great. I loved it. It was a fantastic job.
Okay.
And what was it like when you first went through the cathedral doors? I bet you've been through many cathedrals, haven't you? So was this the most striking one? Do you remember what it was like?
I do remember the first time I came to Peterborough. I came to evensong at the cathedral one Saturday afternoon. My son was playing football at Posh, and I remember
playing football at Posh.
He was he's a footballer. He's a coach at Posh. He plays for Peterborough Sports, and he was, as a teenager, a scholar at Posh. So we've got links with Posh that go back a little while.
Okay. We need to name the footballer, don't we?
Well, it's Hugh Alban Jones.
Hugh Alban Jones. Okay.
Yes, he's a lovely young man. He's 25 this year. He was a scholar at Peterborough United, and they had links with Neen Park. So he'd come across on the train every day from our last parish and catch a bus from the station to Neen Park, and he'd do his football there.
And what position is he?
Yes.
He's
a midfielder. Yeah. He's a midfielder. I know that really.
That was almost a tricky question.
I'm not a great footballer. I don't really understand it. I get confused at half time when they change the direction of play.
Yeah. So at that point then, when you came to Peterborough, were you offered the position of Vice Dean?
No. I had no idea that I would end up working here. I came as a tourist, if you like, and I remember being struck by this extraordinarily beautiful building, but I had no idea that I would end up having the privilege of working here.
When did that happen?
Well, I arrived in 2015. I applied for a job. They're advertised in what's called the Church Times, sometimes affectionately known as the Church Crimes. And I remember applying for the job, and here I am.
Church Crimes, not the Church Times. So you applied for the job in 2015, so therefore you've been here, well, next year will be...
This year it'll be 9 years. Next year, yes.
And I guess as John and I talk to you and we dig into your day-to-day role at the cathedral? What's a typical day of the Vice Dean?
The wonderful thing about being the Vice Dean, or actually of being a clergy person, is that there's very rarely a typical day. Nearly every day is different. There's new things to do. There are obviously some things that we do regularly and often, but most days are different. That gives us great job satisfaction, the variety of things that we do. The day always starts with morning prayer. That's at 8 o'clock in the cathedral every day, and there's always evensong or evening prayer at 5:30 every day. So those are sort of the bookends. Sometimes there are things before that, like on a Wednesday morning, I talk to my friend Kev on the wireless.
On PCR, yeah.
And sometimes there are things after evensong, like meetings and trust meetings and whatever.
Yeah.
So those are the two fixed points in the day. And then there are various meetings that take place during the day. Sometimes to talk about really important things like funerals or weddings or baptisms. Sometimes to talk about the running of the cathedral. There's an awful lot of administration that needs to be done. So no 2 days are the same.
And then at certain times of the year, obviously, we've just had Easter, Christmas, etc. Gets very busy, I would imagine.
Very busy indeed. I think we had 29 services in Holy Week, starting on Palm Sunday and going right the way through till Easter Day. And so it's quite a lot of time in church.
And that's a lot of people through the door for
Yes.
these
Yes.
services.
Yes, several hundred at a time.
Who decides who does what service?
Well, there's a team. We have the Dean, who's in charge, and there are 3 clergy who work with him. There's my colleague, the canon precentor. It's her job to organise the services and to write them, and then we divide them up equally. So some of us do some bits and some do others.
Interesting. One question I'd like to ask is about how nervous you might get. If you're giving a service in the cathedral and the cathedral's packed, how many people would be in a packed cathedral?
Well, these days, the maximum we're allowed is 1,500. Before the fire regulations were tightened up, we have had over 2,000 in there on
Goodness
one
me.
occasion, and that was quite intense.
So if you're there in front of 1,500 or 2,000 people and they're all looking at you, you stood there, what's it called where you stand?
It's called a dais, the platform, yes,
Platform? I
or
thought
the
it was
pulpit.
Pulpit, that was the
Yes,
word I was
yes,
looking for.
the pulpit.
I just want to imagine if I was in that situation with all of those people coming to the service, all eyes on you. In a way, you're kind of performing, aren't you? And I don't know, feel a few nerves.
Back to the broadcast we were talking
back
about
to the
earlier
broadcaster,
on.
yeah.
Yes, well, sometimes there are a few nerves, and it's good to be slightly apprehensive. I think one shouldn't take these things for granted. But then I've had plenty of training, I've had plenty of experience, and I've usually got something I want to say. So I'm very lucky that people pay me the courtesy of listening to what I say. There is, of course, the other thing, that in the pulpit, you're 10 feet above contradiction.
Literally.
Quite literally. It's quite, no, literally, if not more.
When you say you've got something to say, I mean, is it about, I mean, obviously it's preaching the word of God and people go there because they want to listen to the sermons, the services that you give. But I don't know, choosing the messages that you want to share with people, is that easy? Does that come easy to decide what messages that you want to talk about and give?
Mercifully, it's not normally up to me to decide. We have something called a lectionary, which is a rather complicated sounding word for a system of how you read the Bible through the year. So it's divided up on a daily basis, and it's also divided up on a weekly basis. So every Sunday there are 2 or 3 set readings that are given for the day. And in the cathedral we usually follow those readings. And there's normally a message that runs between those themes. Obviously, the central message is that God loves us. Jesus came to tell us how much God loves us, and that's a message that bears repeating as often as you like.
Yeah.
But it's usually variations on a theme.
Do you find it difficult to talk to people sometimes because the world seems so angry at the moment about things that are going on? Obviously, there's a lot of terrible things going on in, Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, etc. Things like that happening. And you get the feeling that the country's quite depressed, the world is quite depressed. I mean, what do you say to people when they say to you, well, how can there be a God with what's going on in the world?
Yes, not many people do ask that, but it is a very good question to ask. The thing about believing in God is it doesn't give you all the answers. For me, it makes more sense for all those difficult questions when there is a God, rather than saying there is no God. But it doesn't give you a get out of jail free card. Bad things happen to all of us and difficulties come our way. With regard to the problems in the world, and I think we are a divided world. Our country is more divided. Look at America, the divisions, the deep divisions there. I think the same thing is true here and in many other countries of Europe. And I think that's where the church really does have a role to play, to bring people together. We have so much more in common with each other than what divides us. And I think it's our job to try and help people understand that, to realise that. We may disagree about politics or religion, doesn't really matter. We're still humans together.
And the cathedral, I've always found, is a place, a space, if you like, that is open to anybody, any faith.
One of the parts of my job that I really enjoy, that seems appropriate to Peterborough, is the interfaith dimension. I chair a small group that meets every other month online. We met during COVID, started meeting during COVID, the Interfaith Community Support Group, rather a title, but the Interfaith Support Group is a great group of faith leaders and people involved in communities of faith throughout the city. And because we've met so regularly and often, we've actually formed quite strong friendships and we enjoy each other's company. So even though we look at the world from completely different perspectives of faith, we still recognise our common humanity and recognise that we have things in common that we want to promote together.
I have to say, during COVID, that was really one of the most striking times for me, when everything was shutting down. And then the cathedral shut down for the first time in however many hundreds of years. It was a real momentous.
900?
Yeah, it was.
Not 900, actually, no.
Wasn't there some time? Well, no, you tell. You're the expert. You know there.
I think the last time all the churches in the country were closed was probably at the time of bad old King John, when Pope put the whole country under interdict, and all the churches were closed for a couple of years. Nobody was allowed to be married.
What year?
1204, the beginning of the 13th century. So it's a long time ago.
Yeah, we weren't around then.
I wasn't, no.
Neither was I.
No, different King
So,
John to me, yeah.
Indeed. So even through fire and famine, through plague and flood, the churches have been open. So the closing of the churches was a huge and momentous step. And I think many people would say perhaps the wrong decision. It's interesting, in the following lockdowns, churches were allowed to remain open. Places of worship, not just churches, were all allowed to stay open, recognising the important thing, the important role that faith has in many people's lives.
Faith, a psychological, a meeting place, a time, time for reflection while the world was wondering what was going on. Yeah, it was some time, that, wasn't it?
It was quite a time. The physical building of the church is so big, it's almost as good as if you're outside anyway. All the restrictions about not meeting in public, we observed them as far as we possibly could. But actually the church is such a big space, it was quite a safe place to be. There were some positive spin-offs though about COVID. The church, not just the cathedral, went online during COVID, and we still have a weekly online service that we broadcast every Sunday morning on our cathedral website, our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So every week I put a little service together, and we have people from the congregation to do readings and lead the prayers, and there's a sermon with some hymns. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, if you can't get to church, join us online.
Yeah, and if you live somewhere else but you still, maybe you lived in Peterborough at some point in your life and you want to be back there, in effect.
Every week, or not quite every week, every month I hear from somebody who I don't know about, who has tuned in and keeps tuning back in to our services on Sunday. So there's one of our top fans actually lives in America. Brilliant. And she watches every week, and she normally comments every week how much she enjoys being part of our community.
So aside from the services that we've been talking about, what else happens at the cathedral in terms of how many baptisms, how many weddings, how many funerals typically?
Because it's not a parish church, we can come back to that if you like, we have rather fewer of those services than many parish churches. If you live in a parish, you have a right to be baptised there, or to be married there, or to be buried there, but Peterborough Cathedral doesn't have a parish. So getting married there, you can do it if you've got a qualifying connection.
Or a big checkbook.
No, you need to have a qualifying connection. You also need a big checkbook. Yes, it's not the cheapest place to get married, but you need to have a legal qualifying connection.
Okay.
So, for example, if you were a student at the King's School, the Peterborough Cathedral School, then you're allowed to get married there. That gives you the qualifying connection. If you worked for the cathedral, lived in the precincts of the cathedral, you have a connection there.
Now, what about running the building? I've spoken to Chris Dallaston, the Dean. I've spoken to all sorts of people connected to the cathedral over the years, and it's always shocks me just how expensive it is to open the doors. Even
Like,
the same
like their heaters, for example, how
Yeah.
much they cost
To heat the
to
building,
run
to
and
pay
things
the
like
bills.
that, insurances and stuff.
Last
give
year
us a
it was
sense.
£4 a minute to run the building.
Hold on a minute. £4 every minute.
Yes, it's about £5,800 a day.
We've been talking
To
for about
run it.
15 minutes at
Goodness
the moment.
me.
They're £60 straight off.
Yes, yes.
So who's facing up to the challenge of raising enough money to pay for that cathedral to run every year? Is it a team effort, all of you?
Yes, the cathedral is run by a group called the Chapter, which is 4 clergy people and 5 lay people, and we meet nearly every month, and we are responsible for the strategic goals for the cathedral and for raising and making sure the money comes in.
So you know what you've got to spend every year, typically. Therefore, you know what you need to bring in every year, typically.
It's typically Mr. McCorber, 20 shillings, and we sometimes spend 19 shillings and sixpence, but usually we spend 20 shillings and sixpence, and we only get 19 shillings and sixpence in.
Yeah, so it's tough.
And you're facing a cost of living crisis like everyone else is as well.
It's tough for everybody. It's tough, and many charities have really struggled during this last couple of years. The cathedral is no exception. They've always been expensive places to run. They've always run, I think, on philanthropy, on people's generosity, on people's faith. They're not a loss. They're not a profit-making organisation. They're never set up to be.
Is this the same for all cathedrals, do you think?
Well, there are 42 or 40 cathedrals, depending how you count, and they're all slightly different. So some of them are significantly poorer than Peterborough, and some of them are significantly richer than Peterborough. So no 2 cathedrals are the same.
Okay, and of course you have many other ways of fundraising for lots of events going on throughout the year in Peterborough. Would you like to tell us a little bit about anything you can, about anything?
Are you going to go straight there now?
I'm going to go straight there now.
Canon Tim, what is the summer exhibition going to be at the cathedral this year?
My dear friend Kev, if I told you that, I'd have to shoot you on the wireless. That would never do, would it? I can't tell you yet.
You told me last week, we'd find out this week.
I know I was misled, or in fact I misled you. I can tell you that it's going to be something very big. It's going to be something very deep. And if you go on the cathedral website, you'll even hear aquatic water
I was going to
noises.
say, is it going to go swimmingly?
I think it should go swimmingly.
Am I missing something here?
Go on the cathedral website or the Facebook page and you'll see there's a tease that says we're going big and we're going deep and we're going underwater.
Last year's exhibition was...
Star
Oh, I
Wars.
thought we were going to hum the Star Wars thing.
It was Unofficial Galaxies last year.
Unofficial Galaxies.
It was great.
Tell me this, are you allowed to sort of reveal what that meant to the cathedral? Did it make the cathedral lots and lots of money, putting these kind of events on, or are they just bring the people in and kind of pay for themselves?
Oh no, I can gladly tell you that. This year is the 3rd year of those big exhibitions. We had our dinosaurs 2 years ago. We had Unofficial Galaxies last year, and this year's is the 3rd in that sort of series. We have them for 2 reasons. Firstly, is to get people over the door. That is the most amazing building, and we want as many people as possible to come and see it and experience it. But let's also be quite honest that we need to pay our way, and those big summer exhibitions help to pay the bills. So we want people to come, and we have to charge them for it in order to pay our way. So yes, it is definitely, it's aimed to be a fundraiser for the cathedral to help keep the doors open, to help pay for all our running costs.
Yeah, and you've had over the years a Tim Peake exhibition as well. You've had so
was
many
brilliant.
things. Yeah,
The Tim
there's been
Peake
so
exhibition
many
was brilliant.
things, and it brings in people perhaps who wouldn't normally go to a cathedral as well.
That's exactly right, and this summer exhibition this year is going to be family friendly, so we hope that mums and dads or grandparents who are looking after grandchildren might want to come and spend an hour or 2 in the cathedral.
The people who are out there to do it, we're going to come on and talk about Peterborough United going to Wembley soon. You know, they've sold over 21,000 tickets. Peterborough fans, over 21,000 tickets. That's a lot of tickets for a city, you know, the size of Peterborough. How big is Peterborough? 200,000?
Yes, over there, 230 maybe.
230,
Yeah.
you know, so this city is a big city. It's a growing city.
It's also so well placed for communications
Yeah, it
with
is.
the A1, with the railways. It's a fantastic place to come. So we hope people will come from elsewhere as well and come and see this exhibition as they came last year.
This
and
is
even
the
more the year
exhibition
before.
that you can't tell us about yet.
That's the same one.
I presume. Sorry, Kev.
Well,
were you gonna-
I was just going to just on that same point. It's not just big exhibitions. I mean, I'm looking at the website now. There's Fleetwood Mac by candlelight to enjoy. Heather Small from M People's going to be there in early May. I'm even looking at a link here that says you can go and do yoga at the cathedral.
Yes, and yes, absolutely. We want to share that space with people. I don't own the building, nor does the chapter. We hold it in trust for the people of Peterborough and for generations yet to come. So in order to make sure that it survives and is still standing, we need to pay our bills. But we also want to share the space. When people come to look at an exhibition, let's say Unofficial Galaxies or the dinosaurs, they all come and they enjoy the exhibition, but they also enjoy the wonderful surroundings. Last year, the man who was hosting the exhibition said, this is almost 2 tickets for the price of 1, because you get to see the free cathedral, which is always free, and then you also get to see the exhibition.
That's a really interesting point, that, isn't it?
And you've also got the space sort of around it as well. We went to see, me, my wife, and my daughter went to see Alice in Wonderland last year. The sort of what do you call
The
it?
cloisters.
Is that where which was excellent, by the way. So you do have those sort of shows as well.
There are a whole
around.
programme of a whole series of them this year. Open air in the cloisters. That will be magnificent. And Alice in Wonderland, all sorts of things. Wind in the Willows. Do look on the website. There are fantastic things for all the family. There's even going to be, wait for it, a teddy bear's picnic that's aimed at 2 to 6 year olds.
Fantastic. So
Super.
that means whoever's programming and planning all of these things, you're thinking of every single generation. What can we do to attract them into our space?
Absolutely. And if a 2-year-old comes and feels at home at the age of 2, they'll want to come back when they're 6 and when they're 10. And we hope they'll want to come back when they're 20, 30 and 40.
Should we mention the place where you can get coffee and cake just directly opposite the cathedral?
Beckett's, is that what you're
Because
talking
Beckett's,
about?
Beckett's traditional tea rooms.
Nice space there, isn't it?
Oh, it's a fantastic space. Again, an historic space. But we have new management running a tea shop there, traditional tea rooms, and they are marvellous, yes. If you like sweet things and scones and cakes and tea, that's the place for you.
I like all of those things, so that's good.
Do you all get housed, or you and your sort of senior clergy colleagues? Because when you walk into the cathedral grounds, there's like a house there, house there, house there, house there.
and
I'm
around
thinking, who lives in all these little homes? May we ask that?
Yes, you may. One of the great privileges is to live in some of the historic buildings of the old abbey or the monastery, because it wasn't a cathedral until 1541. It was an abbey for the first 900 years of its life, nearly. So yes, it's a great privilege to live in these buildings that have been converted.
So one of those
into
buildings
houses.
is where you live, and another one is where Chris Alliston, the dean,
That's
lives.
right, and the Canon Presenter has another one as well, yes.
Fantastic.
And these buildings have had all sorts of uses over the 900 years that they've been there. And it's tremendous to be able to think that we're part of that.
It's lovely to walk around that space outside the cathedral, John, isn't it? You mentioned the cloisters as a place to see an event, but some people I noticed, you can go and grab a coffee from one of the coffee shops in town and just walk into the grounds of the cathedral and just sit and sip your coffee and kind of contemplate time.
It's
almost.
absolutely. It's a very good space to contemplate one's place in the world
Yeah.
and the universe.
Yeah.
It lends itself to that sort of speculation. It's a great place to walk around, and the gardens are looking absolutely magnificent for the last couple of years. We encourage people to come and look round. We want them to see it.
And even jog around when the Great Eastern Run comes. as
Yes,
well.
Chris, the Dean, and I were standing towards the end of the race last year, and the number of people said, "Oh, I've never been to this part of the precincts.
Really?
I didn't know we could be here." Those are the ones that were able to speak. Many of them were just gasping by then.
Yeah, it's
I'd
lovely
love
that
to
the half marathon in the city went through the grounds.
We were pleased with it, very
Whoever
pleased.
came out with that idea, massive thumbs up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, do you know, we normally speak for 15 minutes to our guests. We've been speaking for 26 minutes.
Gassing on, I'm
But
so
it's been-
sorry.
It's been
Great.
fantastic, and I think it's important, maybe in closing, to talk about the fact that the cathedral is a charity, a registered charity. It's open and it's free to go in to anybody of any faith. You can check the website, peterborough-cathedral.org.uk. Can I just ask, just in closing, a little bit about some of the really wonderful spaces inside the cathedral of great historical significance. Because in case there's people listening to this who've never been inside the cathedral before, they've listened to you talking to him, they think, oh, he's a nice guy, I'm going to go and have a look in the cathedral. Just give us 2 or 3 examples of wonderful spaces that people need to check out if they've never been before.
I hope they'd come not because they've heard my voice on the radio. I hope they'd come because they want to see this architectural gem, one of the finest Norman buildings in the country. There are fantastic things to see, far too long to tell you all. You might want to come and see Queen Catherine's grave. Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, is still buried in the cathedral, and many people come to see that. You might want to come and see the magnificent roof, both in the nave, which is the largest painted roof in Europe of its age, or you might want to come and see the new roof in the new building, by which I mean 1499, which is new by comparison with the rest of it. Magnificent fan vaulting stone roof, which is an architectural gem.
One thing I'd recommend is doing the tower tours.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. The views you get to see, the places you're allowed to go that are normally off limits, and you've got lots and lots of volunteers. We've not even mentioned your volunteers, who are all brilliant. I'm so sorry we're out of time, but what a guest.
Marvellous.
John?
Absolutely
Really nice.
brilliant.
In
Yeah,
fact, we've not
thank
done
you,
this
Tim.
before. Can we give our guest on the Peterborough podcast a little round of applause today?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having
Can
me.
you not clap louder than that, John? It was like
It was audible.
Polite Anglican applause.
Yes, it was.
Vice Dean of Peterborough Cathedral, Canon Tim, our guest today on the Peterborough podcast.